Sound's working, mic's working. Alright, sound's working, mic's working. Okay, music's playing, and then you got music and mic at the same time. Alright, sound's working, mic's working. Okay, music's playing, and then you got music and mic at the same time. Okay, music's playing, and then you got music and mic at the same time. Alright, one last test here before I get to work. Music should be 25%. Voice is at 40. Alright, one last test here before I get to work. Alright. On to UV mapping. I'm going to try to name the channel to describe, title this broadcast, UV mapping in Blender. typing in Blender and English. Sorry, that's on a different screen. But just naming this broadcast so it saves as UV mapping for later. I've already got the head UV mapped. So let's see. On to the body. And I said this in earlier, but I'm pretty new to UV mapping and actually Blender. So some of this stuff I'm going through tutorials myself, but once I get past that and into Unity, actually making some progress on games. The part I'm having a problem with is just marking the seams for a character figure.
Now, a very nice flat shape that we can work with. We'll go ahead and do the same thing with the arm, and we'll separate. We may merge them to be less noticeable, and then the front, there's really not much you can do about it in terms of okay, seam all the way around the base of the leg, just like this, and we'll hit Control E to mark that seam. And if we unwrap this now, you'll see the leg here is now a very nice flat shape that we can work with. We'll go ahead and do the same thing with the arm, and we'll just choose the full loop right there, so we'll mark that one, and then I'm going to put a loop or a seam right down the center of the bottom of the arm, where again it's not going to be seen much, and we'll go ahead and mark that. And if we unwrap it once more, you can see leg, deselecting the outside of the leg and any adjacent vertices on the feet. Choose the full loop right there, so we'll mark that one, and then I'm going to put a loop or a seam right down the center of the bottom of the arm.
So a seam at the arm, it looks like right here is probably going to be the best spot, and alt select to get a whole loop. Seam. If I press A to deselect, I should see that whole loop in red. And then also get a seam all the way down the bottom of the arm. My model, the goal here is low poly, so I don't have a seam, actually a line going down the bottom, right on the bottom. I'm going to go for towards the back of the arm because I'm guessing that you will see that area less than the front of the arm. And shift select to get rid of those. And mark another seam. And go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. Alt select, loop all the way around, mark the seam. Find the line at the back of the arm, select that. Get rid of the rest of those. Mark it as a seam. And push A to deselect. I'm going to go ahead and select A to select all. U unwrap. Just to take a look at what. And it's actually looking pretty good. But
where again it's not going to be seen much, and we'll go ahead and mark that. And if we unwrap it once more, you can see as soon as we... Oh, I did the wrong unwrap. Here's why. I did cube projection. If we do unwrap, there we go. You can now see that the arm is a single shape. Okay, so this is getting better and better. The torso is really weird right now, and it will continue to look weird until we do a couple of things. And namely is I want to add a seam right down the center of the back, and we need to be sure to deselect the front. Again, I'm doing it down the back, since you won't see the back of the character nearly as much as you will see the front in most cases. You know, if you're doing a still shot where you're seeing her back and not the front, then feel free to put the seam down the front. You know, you kind of have to place them based on your immediate need or the goal of the project. Okay, and so right now you can see that there's still one problem, and that is that this is getting all funky right around the shoulder here. And we can solve this by just adding one more loop or one more seam right down the shoulder like this. And now if we unwrap this, you can see that it unwraps very, very nicely. Now unfortunately that's kind of right in the center, but there's not a lot that we can do about this at that current time. So okay, and so right now you can see that there's still one problem, and that is that this is getting all funky right around the shoulder here. And we can solve this by just adding one more loop or one more seam right down the shoulder like this. And now if we unwrap this, you can see that it unwraps very, very nicely.
Okay, so seam straight down the back. Alt select. And that almost worked perfectly. Actually, it did. Well, wait a second. I have a seam around the two legs.
With the arm, and we'll just okay, and so right now you can see that there's still one problem, and that is that this is getting all funky right around the shoulder here. Namely is I want to add a seam right down the center of the back, and we need to be sure to deselect the front. Again, I'm doing it down the back, since you won't see the back of the character nearly as much as you will see the front in most cases. You know, if you're doing a still
So his line goes all the way down here in the middle, but I have a seam from the legs that actually intersects here. And you can see the inside of the legs are UV mapped pretty well. There's no stretching or anything, so that's gonna work fine. Go ahead and mark that seam. And then a seam from the top of the shoulder to the back of the neck. I'm just gonna go with those two. And mark seam. Back looks a lot better. Seam is definitely noticeable, but the front looks really good. The top of the legs could use some scaling, but that can be done on the UV map later.
Shot where you're seeing her back and not the front, then feel free to put the seam down the front. You know, you kind of have to place them based on your immediate need or the goal of the project. Okay, and so right now you can see that there's still one problem, and that is that this is getting all funky right around the shoulder here. And we can solve this by just adding one more loop or one more seam right down the shoulder like this. And now if we unwrap this, you can see that it unwraps very, very nicely. Now unfortunately that's kind of right in the center, but there's not a lot that we can do about this at that current time. So we're going to go ahead and leave that as is, and we will look more into it further. But at this point, I've done most of the major seams except for the hands and the feet. So let's do that now. And some of you may be thinking, well, I've seen UV unwraps where they have the entire body, legs, and arms connected. And this is true, and actually I'm going to show you how to do that. But first I want to get all of the major areas set apart so that we can see where we're going and then refine it more and more as we go. Because remember, right now I'm trying to make use of my mirror modifier to get the majority of the seams applied such that when I need to go and refine it, I don't have to worry about doing as much manual work. Now, the way that I like to do the hands and the feet is to basically split it in half edgewise and fold it over on itself along the flat side of the hand here. And so I can do this by going in and looking at my hand here, and I can see I have this center loop right here that's pretty much a middle point. So I'll just select it, and this will take just a little while to go through and select all these due to the various turning edge loops and such for the detail in the hands. But I can select all this, and I'm just using my Alt-Shift right-click to select all these loops. And as soon as I get them all selected here in a moment, you will see what I mean. Okay, and now on the pinky here, I'm going to end the seam right at the edge of the pinky and not continue it. I'm going to hit Control E and mark that seam. Then I'm going to go back and do the same thing along the thumb as rest of the fingers, except for the pinky. And then I'm going to continue that all the way down the side of the hand, right like this. So if I mark that seam, and now watch what happens when I'm just going to select just this one area so we can see it full screen. And we'll hit U and unwrap. And now you can see that the hand is having a few problems because it looks like I missed a couple edges. So let's go in and look. And you can see I missed an edge there, or two edges. Just double check, see if I missed any others. Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Now we'll select it and hit U and unwrap.
I think I'm
And I'm missing another edge.
I've done the same thing. This character, low poly character, doesn't have any fingers.
There we are. Missing a lot of edges. Okay, now we'll try this for a third time's the charm. If I quit doing cube projection, there we go. Okay, so now you can see that it's completely unwrapping around itself right here. And right now it's a little funky just because we've got some overlap here, but we'll be able to solve that a little bit down the road. So for the time being, we're going to leave this as is. Since we've got that in place now, we'll move on to the feet. And we're going to do the same thing with the feet. And so I want to choose this center loop that I have going through here. And in this case, it goes all the way around, so it's very convenient. And I just want to deselect all of the vertices on the left cube projection. There we go. We'll be able to solve that a little bit down the road. So for the time being, we're going to leave this as is. Since we've got that in place now, we'll move on to the feet. And we're going to do the same thing with the feet. And so I want to choose this center loop that I have going through here. And in this case, it goes all the way around, so it's very convenient. And I just want to deselect all of the vertices on the left, or her left side of the foot. So I'll hit Control E, mark that seam, and unwrap that. And you can see the foot actually unwrapped really nicely like that. So it's very convenient. And I just want to we'll be able to solve that a little bit down the road. So for the time being, we're going to leave this as is. Since we've got that in place now, we'll move on to the feet. And we're going to do the same thing with the feet. And so I want to choose this center loop that I have going through here. And in this case, it goes all the way around, so it's very convenient. And I just want to deselect all of the vertices on the left, or her left side of the foot. So I'll hit Control E, mark that seam, and unwrap that. And you can see the foot actually unwrapped really nicely like that. But I need to do a little bit more because right now this is all the ankle area is getting a little messed up. And so I can solve this by, we'll just bring these edges in, Control E, mark that seam. And the reason I'm doing this one is it's right at this seam here. I could do it there, but then I would have 3 different corners with which to try and fix the seams, whereas here I will only have this one edge. So we'll do that again. And there you can see it now unwraps very, very nicely. Okay, at this point, I'm going to unhide everything.
Okay, so all the way around the foot and up the back of the ankle to the ankle loop. And this base mesh is such low poly that it doesn't have a loop. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. Well, if I do Control R, I get an edge loop cut. I'm gonna go ahead and save it first. And try this. See if I do an edge loop cut right here. Those quads are just really small compared to, but I guess that's okay. We want to be able to detail the texture on the feet. Okay, so now there is a loop all the way around. And I'm just going to undo to make sure that I get the same exact cut on each foot. Got the mouse moving. We also have to do one on the back of the heel, but that's not going to work. So I'm going to try the knife. I would like to have the same exact cut on each foot, but that's going to have to work. Okay, so the outside of the foot does not get unwrapped, and you have marked the seam along the inside of the foot. And same thing here. Mark the seam all the way along the inside of the foot to the back of the heel and up to the ankle loop. Mark seam. A to deselect. And A to select all, U unwrap. And the feet actually look pretty well unwrapped. You can see the top of the foot here and around the back of the foot to the back of the ankle, and then the bottom shoe, or the bottom of the foot. And there's is the other foot. So that looks pretty good.
Leave edit mode, and I want to go ahead and apply my mirror modifier, because now we're going to go in and tweak. And so first, going back over to our object data buttons on the head UVs, or the body UVs, let's first, with the whole head selected, we're going to select everything, and we'll hit weld just to get it out of there. Switch over to face mode, and we want to select the head and the ears if I can. And then we are going to hit or select everything in UV edit mode, hit W, weld, and P to pin it, move it out of there. And then we can just hide that, select the whole body, hit U, and unwrap. And now you'll notice that when we unwrap, since we applied the mirror modifier, we now have a very nice two-sided mesh. At this point, we can go ahead and add a UV test grid because we need to see where the distortion is, where we need to fix issues, and things like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click New, and you notice it immediately gives us a black image. So I can hit F6 to bring up my, I guess you could call it the operator panel. And we'll go ahead and make this a 2048 by 2048 map, and we want to enable the UV test grid. Okay, so now if we hit Alt-Z in the 3D view, we can see the UV test grid applied to our mesh. And right now, this actually looks pretty darn good. You'll notice that we're getting very little stretching. There's a little stretching around the breast, a little around the bottom, and a little bit on the feet and such. Although on the feet, there's really very little. There's just a little bit of distortion, but we're not seeing stretching. And another thing that we can do when we look for stretching is bring up the properties panel in the UV editor and enable stretch. And everything that is solid blue, which is the majority, is good to go. And then you start seeing a little bit of kind of teal on into green, yellow, and then red is the worst. My general rule of thumb is as long as there's no green, you're good to go. Which case there's not. We see a little teal in here on the breast, but there's not really a good way to fix that necessarily. We can maybe do Properties panel in the UV editor and enable stretch.
I haven't seen this tool, so gotta rewind and find it here. Okay. Display UV stretch. Cool. And everything blue is good, and it's stretched around the green area.
and everything that is solid blue, which is the majority, is good to go. And then you start seeing a little bit of kind of teal on into green, yellow, and then red is the worst. My general rule of thumb is as long as there's no green, you're good to go. Which case there's not. We see a little teal in here on the breast, but there's not really a good way to fix that necessarily. We can maybe do a little manual tweaking by selecting areas in here and using the proportional edit by turning on O and hitting G to move these around. But really, chances are you're not going to be able to see much, because Blender's UV Unwrapper is actually very, very good and does a very good job of unwrapping everything to minimize stretch as much as possible. And so since we're only seeing a little bit of stretch in here, I'm not going to worry about it. And in fact, in this area, we can almost, play into reality with us, in that since this is an area that does see some stretching in skin occasionally, you can almost get away with it and make it work with you. Now, if it were right along the top of the breast or along the rib cage, then we would need to worry about it. But being where it's at, we can go ahead and just leave it as is. And this looks pretty good. So what I want to do now with the body is I want to try and merge some of these maps. Because right now, we have a lot of seams to try and texture out. There's a seam around the leg, the arm, shoulders, things like that. Now, the seams down the leg, down the arm, we can't avoid those. They're going to happen regardless. But we can go ahead and merge some of these. And so what I'm going to do is, let's go ahead and remove, we'll work on one side at a time and see what we can do. So I'm first going to remove the seam here along the shoulder, and I'm going to go around to the back, and let's go ahead and start here and bring these seams down. Or no, actually, let's do this. Starting here, let's bring these seams up like this. Nope. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to take this edge, starting here, bring this down, which you'll notice this is kind of the seam between the muscles and the shoulder and the back. So that'll work well into the seams because it'll tend to be hidden. We'll bring these down, hit Control E, and mark that seam. And let's go ahead and unwrap that and see what we get. Cool, so you can see that this is connecting pretty nicely. But we're getting some overlap here, and so we'll go ahead and remove this top shoulder seam and see if that works in for us. Sweet. So there we go. That worked real well. We just eliminated almost 2 full seams. We got rid of this whole area. Now there's just a little bit along the neckline there and the back of the arm where, again, you're not going to see it much. So we'll go ahead and do that same seam on the other arm.
Alright, so get rid of the alt select around the arm, period to focus. And clear the seam. And now we were just going to go straight from that arm up to the shoulder. Same thing over here, clear the seam. 2 lines straight up to the shoulder, mark the seam. Perfect.
Bring this down. We hit Control 1 to go to back view. We can get a straight on view so we can see more accurately what we're doing. We'll mark that seam and then get rid of this seam here. And now unwrap that. And you can see both arms are connected very nicely. We're not getting hardly any stretching. There's just a teeny bit here, teeny bit there, a little bit there. Not anything to worry about. And you can see this in effect if we hit Alt-Z to bring in the UV test grid. Well, you notice there's no seam here, so that makes it much easier to texture. Ideally we would not have to have seams, but of course it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So let's do the same thing with the legs now, and I want to, since our focus is normally going to be on the front of the character, and since we have the crease along the buttocks to help us hide seams there, let's go ahead and try and remove this seam right along the front of the legs. So first, we'll just go ahead and remove that seam there up to this point and up to about halfway, and let's try unwrapping that. And you can see that's actually working pretty well, but we could probably go ahead and connect this even further. And in fact, maybe we can connect it all the way along. So let's go ahead and remove that, and we'll remove that. We have this seam right along the front of the legs. So first, we'll just go ahead and remove that seam there up to this point and up to about halfway, and let's try unwrapping that. And you can see that's actually working pretty well, but we could probably go ahead and connect this even further. And in fact, maybe we can connect it all the way along. So let's go ahead and remove that, and we'll remove that. Whoops, I removed sharp rather than the seam, and we'll unwrap that. And there we go, that actually works real well. So that worked very well in our favor to just remove the entire seam from the leg, aside from going down. So in this case, we didn't need to separate them at all. There we go, and you can still see we're getting practically no stretching and no further stretching from what we were getting. So this is working very, very well in our favor. One last thing I would like to look at, and I can't guarantee this is going to work, but we may actually even be able to remove the hand seams.
Alright, that worked really good for him. On this model, if it's gonna work, we're definitely gonna have to get the seam to go. Okay, to the middle. I'm gonna unmark those seams, and then come in underneath here and find the line that this seam is connected to. There's two of them there. Mark the seam, deselect, just to make sure that it's connected. Looks good. Hope this actually works. Looks like it does. You can see the legs stretched down here underneath, but that's fine because that's in between the legs. A little bit of stretching under the breast, which is fine, and in the armpit. These are the arms, both the feet, both the hands.
And the feet seams. So let's go ahead and remove those seams. And we need to go ahead and bring these along. So we'll mark those seams because this seam needs to be connected so that it can unwrap well. And we can see that actually worked.
Alright, same thing for the hand and the feet. Get rid of the wrist loop. Clear seam. And we need to connect so connect on the outside of the hand or on the inside by the thumb. I would probably say the inside by the thumb. Just gonna check the way he did it here. Looks like he's definitely going inside to the thumb.
Very well. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing on the other side, and then add it to the feet. There we go. And so even though it was nice to be able to see where the seams were in the beginning so that we kind of filter things out, now we're able to go back and reconnect things such that they work well. And in this case, I'm actually going to redo some of what we did earlier. And I'm going to remove this seam here, even though it works really well.
Clear the seam. Grab two of those lines so that we have a seam all the way to the shoulder. Okay, onto the feet. And I'm just going to check and see. Obviously the inside of the ankle is going to be the way they go here. So I'm just going to clear that seam. That actually looks pretty funny. Let's see what happens here.
It would be nice if this was a continuous loop, because this would be an easier actually going to and beginning so that we kind of filter things out. It's now we're able to go back and reconnect things such that they work well. And in this case, I'm actually going to redo some of what we did earlier, and I'm going to remove this seam here, even though it works really well. It would be nice if this was a continuous loop, because this would be an easier seam or a harder seam to fix than one little seam here. And for one, this is along the bottom of the foot, where you're going to have a lot of calluses, you'll have discoloration in the skin, and so that's a better place to hide a seam than right along the normal skin tone. Okay, and you can see that clearly something has gone wrong. And so let's go ahead and look and see what we need to do. First off, I'm going to re-add the seam right around the ankle just to see what happens. So it's definitely something with that seam. And looking at this, this one may not be quite so easy to reattach. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this seam up again. We're going to mark that. And then let's try now removing that seam and unwrapping it again and see what we get. And there you can see it's starting to work better. We're getting some overlap here, so we've got some work to do. But what it's doing is allowing this straight form to come down and unwrap cleanly. So let's go ahead and let's think about this. The bottom will pretty much unwrap like this. We want the top coming straight down like you can see here. And so for this to unwrap, we need to think of it as if we were... Hello and welcome to this video tutorial from BlendedCookie.com. Like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click New, and you notice it immediately gives us a black image. So I can hit F6 to bring up my, I guess you could call it the operator panel. And we'll go ahead and make this a 2048 by 2048. Let's first, with the whole head select, there we are. Missing a lot of edges. Okay, now we'll try this for third. Let's go ahead and remove favor. One last thing I would like to look at. And there you can see it's starting to work better. We're getting some overlap here, so we've got some work to do. But what it's doing is allowing this straight form to come down and unwrap cleanly. So let's go ahead and let's think about this. The bottom will pretty much unwrap like this. We want the top coming straight down like you can see here. And so for this to unwrap, we need to think of it as if we were basically unfolding a piece of paper. So I'm going to bring this around and this up here, mark that seam, which then will remove this one. And so some of this, you know, particularly when you're working with a complex form like this, can be trial and error. But once you get it, it can be very, very encouraging and well worth the work. So you can see where it's overlapping there. And I'm trying to think on how we could solve this. And it might be to just add in this seam here, such that the bottom of the foot is able to come down. First off, let's see what that does. Okay, there we go. That's starting to work better. But having done that, we could probably go ahead and, in fact, we are missing, there we go. Yeah, we're missing that chunk. And so let's go ahead and see about removing this seam. Now unwrap that. And again, causes serious problems, which I actually find rather interesting. So we're going to try something. And this is a technique that we really like how this is all working. And so let's just go ahead and select it all.
Okay, first I'm going to check and make sure that the hands work. You unwrap. And, oh yeah, I did actually modify a foot. And it almost looks like it'll work just as is. But I'm trying to look at the hands. And the only way it would be better is if it was shifted over just a little bit. Okay, so that's the top of the hand. So the bottom of the hand be shifted over 2 lines. I don't think that's going to be possible, but the bottom of the arm comes in and it goes up 2 lines. Of course it does. It has to. So I'm just thinking here, if I were to bring it here instead. Yeah, that doesn't quite work. Have to go up here. That might actually work okay. I'm going to mark that seam, but now I have to come in here and select these and get on, clear the seam there. Alright, so now it should only be shifted over 1. Unwrap that again, take a look at the hand, and it's still shifted over 2. However, the top of the hand, which is here, I'm looking at the wrong hand, that's why. Okay. Now it's just off by 1. so it should stay the way it was. So Control Z. All the way back to there. And select all, U, unwrap. And the reason why I undid was just because there was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There should be 3 quads on the top and the bottom of the hands. And that's fine actually, because when I texture the hands, they're pretty much going to have a different texture right along here where there's a shirt, or actually if I'm blending skin, this will be the bottom of the hand, which would be a different texture as well. And did that foot unwrap actually work? I'm coming down here to the foot again, and it actually looks really funny because it's going to unfold one line, okay, and I see that here, which is what? The inside of the ankle. It actually has that seam anyways, no? Yeah. So even on the other foot, out here, it has the one line of quads. Okay. So it would be better to get rid of that. How can I do that? I'm going to watch this for just a second.
All the way down to the ankles. And then we're going to pin it. As you remember, pinning it locks it in place. Although I'm going to leave the bottom loop unselected. So if we pin it, it's not able to unwrap any further. And so we'll do the same thing with those ones as well. And so now, if we select everything, hit U and unwrap, we can see how it'll be affected. And in this case, it's very, very small, and it's very clearly not working. So let's keep working with this. We're going to go back in and thinking. We're going to bring this seam back down, because anytime you can keep your seam straight, do. You know, if you can make it follow the edge loops, it will generally work in your favor. I'm going to remove that one.
And let me see here. Yeah, they both come all the way down. So I'm just going to try something on this foot, which is mark that as a seam and clear out the rest of these. So it just comes straight down and loops around. Just see what happens here. Well, I think that looks pretty good. It unwraps pretty much perfectly. So, Alt select, clear seam, Alt select, clear seam. We don't need any of this. Clear the seam. So it just comes straight down the inside of the middle of the leg to the foot, wraps around. And let me go ahead and select all U, unwrap. And you can see we have one island, the entire body. I'm just curious what happens if I unmark these two, actually just one. Clear that seam, select all, unwrap. Okay, so did it even change anything? Oh well. Let me keep it as is. No, I can't tell if it actually changes it. There was a slight change in scale. Okay. Moving on.
Okay, see, we're getting close. It's just that we have the overlap here, which we might be able to fix, which using a tool called the Live Unwrap, which you can enable under the UV menu, it allows you by pinning parts of your mesh to modify it. And this actually is looking to work pretty well. So what it does is you pin a vertex, and that will keep the vertex from moving. So in this case, these will never move. But then if you grab that pinned vertex, it will interactively unwrap it around your pinning or around your mesh. And so we can see here that if we were to remove this seam entirely, because that actually fits real well in there, then our issue is just the bottom of the foot. And so let's swap this loop. We're going to first clear that seam around here. And let's try unwrapping around the other direction. We'll go around the other side of the foot. So we'll clear that seam, select it, and then deselect this area here and re-add that seam. Which unfortunately did not work in the least. We missed a couple edges there. There we go. There we go. Just like that. So now, since we unwrap the other way, we're able to avoid any of the overlap that it was wanting to affect. I'm going to unpin that one vertex there. Unpin, and then I'm going to turn off Live Transform or Live Unwrap, and we're going to unwrap that again just in case. There we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and mirror these seams on the other foot. So we'll first mark this whole seam, and then we will deselect these areas here up to the big toe, clear that seam, and then we want to remove these seams. And so, although that may have been a little tedious, we made our way through it and ended up with a much better result and a much easier result to work with when texturing than we would if we were to just separate them completely. And so now, if we unwrap this completely, you'll see that we have two very nice feet. And I just unpinned that, and I'm going to go ahead and try unwrapping it again, just see what happens when it's unpinned. There we go. So it'll just help optimize that a little bit. So we have the entire body, minus the head, all unwrapped as a single UV island. And so at that point, I'm going to be sure to save my file before I lose something, which I should have saved a long time ago. And let's switch over to the head. Because at this point, this one, after we hit Control P to pack the island, or yeah, we just need to move it just a little bit, just so that it's not overlapping any of the margins. We can do this. Now, I will tell you there is one disadvantage to doing it this way, where we have a single map, and that is that you don't make nearly as good use of your entire image map as you would if you were to have the individual islands. Because essentially, all of this empty space is wasted pixels, and pixels that you're going to pay for in terms of the image size. And so you're not going to be able to get as much detail as you could if you were making use of all this space. And so if you have a lot of experience texturing, or if you're limited to low-res UV maps, it's a good idea to separate out the islands like we did originally, so that you can make as best use of this space as possible. But if you're not restricted to a small texture size or anything like that, then I encourage you to go this route, as you will find the texturing process to be much, much easier. Or the third route that you could do would be to use multiple UV maps, unwrap it once like this, once with all the islands packed very nicely. You could texture it on this one, and then bake out that texture to your other UV map, which would frankly probably be the best route, because you would get the best of both worlds. But I'm not going to go any further into that, as that's for its own tutorial. But if that sounds of interest to you, then please leave a comment on the thread here on the post, and if there's enough of a response, then I will definitely look into that and see what we can do about bringing that into a tutorial or a tip of its own. But at this point, I want to go ahead and move on to the head, and just for one last check, let's go ahead and hit Alt-Z and look at our very nice, fully unwrapped figure. So at this point, we're ready to do the head, so I'm going to switch back over to the head UV texture, and hit Alt-H, hit Control-Tab and Face Mode, select the face, and then hit Shift-H to hide everything else. Just a portion of...
Alright, and my head's already UV mapped. As we can see right here, even though it looks funny, because the face is just a low poly egg shape, and man, she has some fat cheekbones, but this is a low poly base mesh. Subdivide the head, subdivide parts that need more detail, subdivide the whole model probably, and then go in and add in the detail of the nose and the eyes and the ears. Okay, moving on. Looking at this UV map, everything looks pretty good. All of the squares look pretty uniform in size. Which means when I lay a texture onto it, it's going to map and not be stretched. So I just want to pretty much see that everywhere the squares are not stretched. And the worst part is probably going to be the back by the spine, where the textures don't line up perfectly because of the seam. Cool. export the UV layout as female body UV. And take a look at that in Photoshop. No, we're already done with that. Female head UV. Female body UV. Okay. I probably need to select something. Okay, get Photoshop open. We don't need that anymore. There's the proper UV map. And I might not actually create the texture tonight because it is midnight here. Okay, I need to resize that. 25% at least. Change the opacity so I can see the UV map. And for nothing. All right. No compression, since it's for a game. And back to Blender. And now I need to go to me create a new image, I believe. Or just open one up here. Okay, body 01. And then go to the node editor. And for image texture, just click here and change it to body. And back to the UV editor. Alright, now looking at, I'm going to deselect everything and just go to a textured. And we can see the polygons because they're part of the, actually part of the thing, but the part of the PNG image. But you can see that she has jeans all the way down to her feet. And they look pretty messed up, but that was a quick and easy way to at least prototype it. So on that note, I'm gonna might as well grab this red jacket. 512 is probably gonna be fine. And I'm definitely gonna have to get real close to the bottom edge because those jeans. Because them jeans. Okay. That should complete it. Copy. Paste. And of course the arms are completely wrong shape. So I'm going to copy those. And rotate that to match. Oh, I need to change the opacity of the, or I actually just hide that thing for a minute. And I can see that it's not big enough. I'm just going to scale it. Scale it again. Okay. Good enough. Duplicate. Rotate. Alright, show that jacket again. Probably move these below that layer. Get the eraser out. Go to the jacket layer. That's pretty big. And that should be fine. Except I want 100% opacity and flow. Just gotta bring it in like this. Except that last part on the, there we go. Just go to the seam on the jacket there. Okay. Erase this side. should be good for tonight. Save as a PNG. Place it. Blender should back to texture. Okay, I probably just need to at least go to the node editor and tell it to I saved it as the UV, not good. I need to save it as 01. Body 01.png, replace it. And now I'm going to export the UV editor. Okay, export the UV layout again since I overwrote it. Body UV.png. Okay, that's done. I should be able to see that in Blender folder. UV. Okay. Now back to here. Open up the body 01 image, and now it's red. If I don't pay attention to the back, there's almost a textured. It's a little too late to actually create the texture tonight, but there's a super bad textured low poly character that you do not want to look on the back of. It's a pocket. Okay. And one suspender. So the point is that it is UV mapped pretty dang good. At this point I can go into here and slowly take my time on the texture and get it looking really good. And the head's already done. Cool. It's pretty late and I'm getting tired. It's okay. I'm gonna work with that tomorrow. Save this Blender file and close it. Actually, Okay, I'm gonna make my daily update here. Grab a picture of my green screen I made today. Alright, I'm gonna sign off for the night. I spent quite a bit of time getting the green screen and all the audio stuff worked out today, so I didn't get as much done on the game development as I wanted, but the green screen's a pretty cool feature. I've always wanted to set one of those up anyway, so cool. Signing off for the night, back at it tomorrow morning. And tomorrow I'm going to get the texture, make a real texture, and then rig the character and do one or two animations. And at that point, probably bring it into Unity and see how it looks with a machine gun in her hand. That's it for tonight. Cheers.